Crypto products and NFTs are unregulated and can be highly risky. There may be no regulatory recourse for any loss from such transactions.
Hi everyone, I'm Swathi Moorthy. I am a crypto reporter with Economic Times. 2024 has an interesting start so far. It started with the approvals for the Bitcoin ETF, and more recently, I think Bitcoin reaching $50,000 mark since 2021 and $1 trillion of market cap. It has been an interesting start, but at the same time, we have also been seeing a regulatory news tightening, right? I mean, especially in India, where there has been a lot of uncertainty. This is despite the G20 resolution that we have seen. And also the funding scenario hasn't been great so far, especially for the startups and the founders. The idea is to demystify them what 2024 has in store, not just for investors, but also for founders, startup, and the EVCs in terms of regulation and funding. And for this, we have your Gowree from Nishith Desai, Edul Patel from Mudrex, Harsh from Push Protocol, and finally Raghu from Builder's Tribe. It's great to have you all on board.
Thanks, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so firstly, I want to actually start with how's the Doge? Because the news about the Bitcoin reaching $1 trillion came only yesterday. So I want to start with how is the Josh? Maybe Edul, you can start. I can see you smiling.
My t-shirt says Wagmi, right? So we're all making it.
Yeah, so how is the sentiment in terms of probably the retail investor sentiment? I want to know. I mean, I'm going to come to each of you, but to start with the retail investor. So how is the Josh? I don't know.
It's generally been very positive. We are seeing an upward trajectory since September last year. And the first part of that phase was, just all the excitement around ETF and the uncertainty around ETF, and then that got launched. And then post ETF, now it's just a follow-up of, expectations around halving and where are things moving on that front. Plus, all of this has also led to a general price increase. BTC is up like something like 40% since September, and that always attracts a lot of attention from a wide variety of users. We're also seeing a lot of reactivation. So older users who had just locked their crypto and had basically forgotten about it, coming back to the product, starting to use it again. So in general, we are still actually seeing more of the older crowd come in and start getting affected and impacted by crypto more and more again, starting to participate again in the ecosystem. New users continue to come in, but at roughly the same rate as well.
I think I'll probably add to it why the sentiment shift. I think ETF plays a very crucial role over here. Recently, BlackRock is about to take over MicroStrategy ETF, which basically means investors or new set of investors that don't know the technology but are interested in where it goes. They are coming in. And those are kind of like the new investors that are coming in. Of course, that generates news. So old investors who have forgotten about the crypto or maybe lost it in the boat, they are finding it back again and they're coming back.
I think I can add a little bit more from specifically the startup side of things. A lot of you saw the crypto to AI pivot that happened round about when the OpenAI news was all abuzz. A lot of the AI startups now we start to see having a Web3 angle on it. Also from a growth in terms of growth in terms of just the number of startups that we are seeing apply to our platform, and the amount of investor interest in these startups is actually doubled over the last 3 months. This we can see in terms of startups creating new profiles, startups creating new requests, investors coming on board, investors re-engaging, coming back into crypto. This is all going up in a sense. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is perhaps a longer discussion. As our friends both Edul and Harsh have this wry smile on their face as I say it. But yeah, things are looking up from a proper volumes and numbers game. But again, all of us have been here for a while, and this is par for the course around this time.
I'll just add, to what all have said as to just being not from the industry but working for the industry, what typically happens when some of these new things come up, right? The first set of investors are just trying, figuring things out and all of that. And as Edel rightly said, those who have gone back maybe will come back. But when there is a regulatory certainty starts building up, that is where the serious players, typically the serious investors and big investors, and I don't know, maybe they are the better place to sort of answer whether that has happened, but the likelihood of that happening is more where serious investors start coming in with serious capital, right? More like investment strategy and things like that. The question that we also need to address and see whether with all these changes, whether wealth managers are able to sort of develop confidence in this type of an asset, right? Especially with the the backing that US has given, where I mean, I'm sure we will, as we go along, discuss the benefits of that. But that is where we'll need to see, and if the wealth manager starts supporting it, right, they will be able to educate additional set of investors to come in, right? So I think I'm just sort of forecasting as to what are likely additional points that we are, we are sort of likely to see in near or midterm future.
So it's very interesting, right? I mean, the conversation we are having now, we are having this conversation almost a year after the fallout of FTX. So the fallout happened in November 2022. And so has something fundamentally changed? And Edul was talking about how old users and new users are slowly beginning to come in. But has there been fundamental shift probably in terms of how the sector is being looked up? Maybe, yeah, we'll start with Gowree.
See, honestly, what has changed the way I will look at it, right? What happens is when any country, a strong regulator supports a particular model, right? What we saw here with that support, serious regulated players are coming in, right? I think somebody like Goldman Sachs, and or when the serious regulated players start coming in, what you see is a lot of accountability in the system, right? What we saw, what you mentioned 1 year back, what happened, right? Sometimes that cleansing is also required, right? When a new industry comes in, and we have seen that across several industries, like some cleansing happens. With that, then what happens is heightened corporate governance, transparency, right? Accountability, as I mentioned. Some of these features start getting into the system. When that happens, that actually is a good thing, for an overall progress of the industry, right? That's the way I'm looking at it, because something which was a parallel economy, is it coming to the mainstream, right? When that shift happens, that's the real shift in my mind, because otherwise, when the regulators include, I mean, in India, what is happening, we'll talk a bit later. But what I'm trying to say, when the regulators in their mind also, this is a part of mainstream, then the entire regulatory framework, accountability, who the players who come in, all that starts changing, which on the positive side.
Correct. So I think just to add, I completely agree. Even when I was thinking of the answer, the first part is definitely this large regulatory change, whereas there is just broader acceptance of crypto across the world. Like whether you talk about US, whether you talk about Europe, whether you talk about UK, Australia, Japan, it just continuously improves. Even in India as well. In my opinion, it's just continuously becoming better and better and better. So I think that is one definite change that's happening. The second thing that's happening is that, at least the way I see it when we speak to our users, what's happening is that when most users first came into crypto, they came in purely from the perspective of कि अच्छा ये तो speculative है, मेरे को 3 दिन में 300 गुना बनाना है and निकलना है, right? Like it's purely from that angle. That's how most users came in early on. But now that a large chunk of users have gone through this one cycle, they also understand that okay, this is not true. Like and at the same time, they also understood a lot of what the value is of crypto and so on and so forth. So this large mindset change that we see in our investors is that they've started to think of it not from the perspective of just कि मेरे को 3 दिन में पैसा बनाना है, but more so from the perspective of making it a part of their overall asset holdings. And I can give you like two numbers. We recently did a survey amongst our users and also from users outside. It covered close to 15,000 respondents. And in that survey, two very interesting things came out. firstly, 45%, sorry, let me tell you the other stat first. 75% of people view that they want crypto to be a part of their long-term holding strategy. And long-term, we asked, was more than 3 years. So 75% of people who answered the survey said that they wanted crypto to be there as a part of their portfolio for more than 3 years. What was shocking to me was that 45% said that they are wanting to include crypto in their retirement portfolio, which is insane, right? Like, who thinks of you? If you 4 years ago would have asked this question, people would have said कि मेरे को 2 दिन में पैसा बनाना है और निकलना है. And now people are talking about, I want this to be a part of their retirement portfolio. And that's the mindset change. And that follows what Gowree was saying, right? Like, regulatory changes make it more acceptable. Once it's more acceptable, people start thinking of it from a different perspective. Their lens has changed from it being purely speculative to now, okay, I can make wealth in this in the longer run. And I understand that money can't be made instantly. I've been through this cycle and now I want it for the longer run, right? So that's how things are. That's the other actual mental mindset change in the user's mind that's happening.
I can add maybe the perspective of the builder and how I saw the general participating ecosystem in Web3 look at FTX and post FTX. Number one, cataclysmic events in crypto, which such as an exchange going up, a stable coin depegging, all of these things are, um, events that shake your belief in crypto as such. FTX actually was seen for what it was. It was theft and commingling of funds. This is not a crypto problem. This was a governance and corporate, policy problem. This, I think, everyone who saw it for what it was in the beginning called it out for what it is, and I think the media also came around and actually called it for what it was. So the belief in crypto did not really die as much as, say, other events of similar scale have caused. What it did have is second and third order effects on startups, which we saw firsthand. FTX was also a large investor as an LP in funds, as well as investing directly into startups at the time. And as policy, several companies had to put their treasuries on an exchange as FTX. And till date, I know founders personally who are still fighting the estate or claiming money back from the estate for whatever they've lost at the time. So those second order effects really hurt belief. A lot of these people that FTX backed, for whatever they were as an exchange, I think they backed a lot of really smart people. And these were guys who had exits in Web 2 and now wanted to do something interesting from an engineering standpoint in Web 3, who were now facing the second and third order effects of exchange crashing and taking company runway along with it, from there. So the biggest change that I have seen is a greater belief in decentralized solutions.
Yeah. I mean, just to build on top of what Raghu said, like with every cycle, what we see when people say that the market has crashed, the market doesn't really crash as much as the market reaches a point wherein a problem surfaces and the market needs to rethink about the approach and then go over it again. Whether it was Ethereum scaling up, whether Bitcoin will gain traction, whether it's was around DeFi or FTX as a central exchange that is trying to get exposure for a lot of underlying people. Like FTX was very strong in LATAM, and one of the reasons was that there was no way for them to invest in crypto even if they wanted to, other than FTX. And then, of course, when these things surface up and the decentralized exchange and the way they are coming up, they were not really ready in terms of user adoption because there was no account abstraction. There are so many problems, or there were so many friction points. And that is why FTX blew up and then it eventually crashed. What that did was it scared off investors and retail investors because they didn't know how to invest in crypto in the correct way, right? We cannot ask them to go to decentralized exchange at least back 2 years back because the type of things that they need to learn, we cannot expect that from a retail user. We can only expect that from like a Web3 developer. But that has changed in the past 2 years. Like Safe has come up, account abstraction is coming up. Even ETF, what it did was it basically told investors that if you're scared of the technology, but even if that's a point and you want to invest in it, you can invest with ETF. And that is something which is very, very cool in a way, because when ETFs are there in US, the population that are getting exposed to crypto, that's getting bigger and bigger. So regulatory uncertainty, especially in US, is going away, and other countries are also trying to experiment. So overall, that event was kinda needed. It was very sad and very unfortunate, but it was kinda needed to make sure that this problem is solved and crypto is again maturing.
There are a lot of points each of you brought up, right? I think each of them require probably detailed discussion. But one thing I think we have to address the elephant in the room, which is the regulation. So the Bitcoin ETF was most celebrated. I mean, when the Bitcoin ETF approvals came in, and I think 10th or 11th January of this year, everybody was so happy. I mean, the Twitter was awash with a lot of congratulatory messages. But I think a few days later, we also heard from RBI governor talking about a cryptomania, likening it to tulip mania of centuries ago. So, where do we stand? Because Edul spoke about how with the broader regulation comes a lot more acceptance, right? But in India, the G20 presidency came, and the resolution came in 2023. But where do we stand? How is it evolving? Because we are getting a lot of mixed signals from what the government wants when it comes to regulation.
So maybe I can go first.
Yeah.
Yes, we saw a lot of up and down. See, first, let's see, first there was a concept where Reserve Bank of India, I think they still hold their position of ban and whatever, right? So let's keep that aside for the
Yeah.
time being. We will need to see, wait and watch. Ultimately, because there are different types of coins also, right? Because currently we are talking broadly, but different coins have their different features, right? So first, from a regulatory perspective, like stable coin may be considered as a payment system, right? Then you have, utility tokens. Then you have tokens that track the performance of a particular company, etc. Right? So I think when we should not even look at it with a broad brush. The moment you talk regulation, that means at least in the Indian context, that is how, probably because different regulators have a different role to play in what that coin is doing in the economy, right? So, for example, if it's a stable coin, it's considered more akin to payment system, right? That is where RBI will come in, right? If it is more akin to security, then SEBI will come in, right? So, I think that is where the tussle, we will need to see how it develops in the Indian context. But at least the narrative of a complete ban, I see there is a shift, at least. Plus, one other thing, ultimately, overall in the G20 conversation or otherwise, this is a global phenomenon, right? It is not like it's a boundaryless phenomenon, right? So for one country to say, I'm going to ban, it never works. We see that in other industries as well. I work a lot on gaming industry also, right? It doesn't work because the cross border, and the problem with this is the underground things that happen, that is more dangerous even from a consumer protection perspective, because if there is no regulation and things happen underground, consumers are more exposed in that case without any rights, correct? So therefore I feel somewhere you will take the path of regulation, right, with the international collaboration and all of that. We did see some draft bill come in which again went into the cold storage, etc. But I think the time has come where we will need to explore, especially after what US has done, right? Does that model protect the investors more, especially the small retail investors who don't sort of are not able to understand the volatility in the market, etc., right? So I think that is what we will need to wait and watch, as to and I don't believe that will happen overnight. We are in the Indian context, timing, it does take time. You have general elections coming in, right? So anything that happens definitely will be post that. So I believe, just as a side point, if the industry can start working, on possible models in the meantime, basis what has happened in last 2 3 years and the developments in the other countries, plus G20, whatever resolutions that have been passed, this is a good time to do that homework. To evaluate what will work, what will not.
Regulations in India, um, I think we are moving in the proper direction. There's, of course, a lot of uncertainty, but there are things that are working very well. Like India just hosted the biggest hackathon of Ethereum, ETH Global, and over there that was supported Hyderabad government. So it's not like that the government is not trying to learn this technology out. Of course, with any new technology, there are risks, but the downside and the upside is always weighed, and that's how the countries go forward in one direction or the other. For example, San Francisco Silicon Valley was made because US preferred that we are going to heavily back tech. We are going to subsidize it. We are going to make sure that infrastructure is ready. And that's why Silicon Valley is known. With India, this potential is really there because we have so many devs. I mean, wherever we go in numbers, right? So we have so many developers. And they know tech, like they are coming from service industry where they know how to build things. And if India is able to shift this regulation into more clarity, I think Web3 will also unleash this era of innovations from India. And yeah, I'm actually very bullish on that. I think India is going in a proper direction. Just a bit slow, but that's okay.
Uh,
Edul, I'm going
So
to
adding on to that, right? I just have one thing because relationship between traditional finance and crypto has always been complex. It is not as straightforward. I think Edul will probably know the best about the relationship between the traditional banks, traditional finance, and crypto. See, I know there has been a lot of improvement that has happened in the last couple of years, right? I mean, there has been huge improvements since is and is there a need for a lot more transparency than we have right now?
So I think from the on the regulatory side, as everyone has said, like things are improving, becoming better, right? You need to also understand that. See, everyone says, "Yaar, jaldi karo," but no one empathizes with the regulator. The job of the regulator is really hard. Like let's get that straight, guys. Like crypto is not a security, not a currency, not a payment system, not an asset. Yet somehow it is all of these together as well, right? So it's a very weird chimera of these things, and it's very hard as a result for a single regulator to get to some sense. So as a result, and typically when that happens in India, everything gets banned, right? Like typically when it's not understood, it's banned. That's the default approach. But for a change for crypto, it's the approach has been okay. We don't understand it yet. Let's start tracking it, right? And that's been the policy thought process as such in general. Okay, let's start tracking it with DES. Let's start tracking it with taxation filing. Let's start tracking it with FIU registrations and so on and so forth, right? So that has improved and become much better. And it'll take its own time. And I think we are moving actually much faster than I would have expected. So I am on the other end with the regulator on that side for this. Uh, Coming to this traditional finance and crypto wala conversation, actually most people that we speak to, in fact, we spoke to some very large banks a couple of years ago, brokerage houses a few years ago, investment banks a few years ago, and those conversations have been ongoing since then. They actually have very high interest in figuring out a way to participate. It's just that because they are not sure of the impact of participating in crypto on their current regulatory stance, and because of the internal policies, they're not able to take a call. So you need to understand that for them, the risk is too high, right? Like they don't want to do something wrong and lose their license. And that's what stops most incumbents from coming in. Here, we want to participate. We know this is like the future and so on and so forth. But what happens if we do this, this, and this? And there is no clear, direct answer for it, right? And that's what's stopping most people from coming in. There's also an opportunity for new companies to start, right? Like who are untethered with their with the original licensing setup and regime, and they can start taking shape and form and participating in the ecosystem. And these are some of the companies that have come up in the last few years, including Mudrex, right? Like our thought process is very similar, except that we are executing from a different lens with crypto first being the agenda. That's what
Gowree,
we've
would you
done.
like to weigh in on this?
So,
This particular point Edul had just shared.
yeah, so I think I echo what he said, on one point where, for example, PMLA amendments, right, for reporting, the taxation. So all this, see, earlier, sometimes what happened is fear of unknown to begin with, right? So what has happened is with the information flow and transparency, as all of us have echoed that transparency is a like is a very very important aspect on this, right? So once you have that, only then the traditional people will start feeling somewhat comfortable that at least I know. Earlier, it was an unknown, right? So at least okay, so much, these are the filings, this is a set of information, etc., etc. But I go back to the point that the serious traditional uh, as between the traditional and what is happening now, the traditional players, the regulated traditional players will come in only when they have regulatory certainty. But with PMLA clarity, maybe they will. We'll need to wait and watch. But I feel that they will come in only if you see a regulatory clarity and change and certainty.
Correct. So let me add some anecdotes, right, as to how this clarity adds. See, last year, March, and then continued till June, July, was the first time the country filed for taxes. Okay. The client demand has started to grow because regulatory improvements have happened. And this is another pressure that adds on to traditional finance folks, right? Like the clients want it, they can't offer it. So now what they start doing it is that as this client demand increases, they start figuring out ways to solve for this client demand. And this is the exact same pathway that got followed in the US, right? Like the client demand exploded over their last cycle, but you can't really directly offer crypto. So, how do large wealth management entities start offering crypto? They said, okay, we will just figure out a way to make it an ETF. And we will file for an ETF. And we will fight the battle with the SEC in a format that the SEC understands, and we will take that conversation ahead and over time get that passed, right? The real reason why ETFs, the real problem that ETFs solve for is actually for the institutional investor. Because for the institutional investor, the problems are here. I don't know how to do compliance of this new asset class. I don't know how to account for profits and losses of this new asset class. I don't know how to custody this asset class. The fund manager who's managing the fund has a fiduciary responsibility of making sure all of this happens right. So with an ETF, all of these problems suddenly get solved in one go, right? So that's how that pathway got solved for or is heading towards a solution in the US. In India, maybe something similar happens, maybe something very different happens. But that happens as a consequence of increased client demand, right? And that's what has started to grow already.
Raghu, I want to come back to you. So you mentioned, right? I mean, compared to last year, you have seen number of startups increasing. You work with a lot of startups, the Web3 startups, and you've also mentioned about a pivot happening from Web3 to AI. But if you look at the starts for the last 1 year, the funding had come down as much as 90%, and the number of Web3 startups that have come on the whole of 2023, they were just around some 20 something startups that have come up in 2023. So, do you see an renewed interest right now when it comes to interest in this particular space, or do you see more interest in AI? So Web3 come AI. So what are you actually seeing here?
So to answer your question, there were 2 points that you mentioned, that amount of funding had dipped down to 90%. If you look at the number of deals that happened, it's largely comparable to what was happening in the main thing. Then size of the rounds were much different. You started to see much fewer number of rounds which crossed your mid to high nine figure checks, but the number of $1 to $10 million checks that were being cut was significantly high. Unfortunately, those large checks can only be absorbed, but the market is also high. When the market is also big, that there is demand for it on the other end, which obviously did not happen. The second thing, that there were 20 startups that were in crypto in the last year from India, is a wrong data point. I mean, I can attest to it directly. From the data on my platform itself, there's the number of startups have largely. Okay, so we have the signal to noise ratio, which we tracked. And in bull market, the noise increases quite a bit. Like everything becomes a crypto startup, which it wasn't. But the number of legit crypto startups have largely remained the same. In the beginning, we were talking about how number and interest and all of these things are going up, and whether that's a good thing or not. Personally, I don't enjoy the bull market as much, because there's just a lot more noise to deal with. But in terms of serious founders, it's largely been the same. In terms of interest, I think the AI thing was a little exciting. I don't think in terms of the actual learning models itself, a lot had changed. They've become a little more effective, but the productization layer, which things like Chat GPT, Perplexity, and all of those things really, showed how the end user could use AI, right? So, which I think suddenly then the question comes in about it's almost becoming a war now, right? Like who owns the most data, whose training sets are the smartest, what biases will be introduced into that, and that's where crypto and decentralization becomes quite an interesting play. And so the narrative there is pretty strong. Big difference is that now people are talking usage. Now people are talking DAUs and MAUs. People are talking about how whether it is effective or not. Like why am I using the blockchain is actually a very smart question to ask nowadays, as opposed to an inconvenient truth that everybody wanted to hide around back then. So all of that bit is changing, right? Like, and so it all does come back to regulation at some point, right? But like Edul said, and many other people have also told, the job of the regulator is not to keep up with the pace of technology. And receiver technology should not wait for the regulator either. These have to kind of do their thing in their own time and meet at some place, like how other emerging technologies have done so. And so the one thing that I would like to shine light upon, or regulations pertaining to where I look, where I see, is with respect to frameworks, so company incorporation and digital asset issuance. ADGM, for example, just a few days back, has launched a very robust framework for setting up a decentralized organization, setting up a DAO, as well as issuing digital assets from there. And there is a very clear framework that the Abu Dhabi government has put out. Solana Foundation is working very closely with them, and now several other exchanges and base chains are now working closely with Abu Dhabi there. This is a great step towards what's happening, and India actually, in that sense, has offered an alternative with the likes of Gift City. There has been more the number of the number of Web3 founders who have told us that, hey, we are considering Gift City as an Indian subsidiary operations is been non-zero, which is more than what I can tell for the last 5 years that I've been in the space, right? That there is
We'll take that conversation offline later.
yeah, we should. We've spoken about this as well. But the point I'm trying to make is that it is increasing, and in my part of the world, which is regulations pertaining to entrepreneurs and issuers of these BDAs, that I think has moved pretty well, and difficulty is not that much of a concern as much as lack of clarity. We know what not to do in India for sure, and we know what we can do in India. So is now more reality in this time around.
The difference is
Harsh will have a lot more things to add to this too.
I do have a lot of things to add to it. First of all, I can personally vouch for crypto startups in India. I know builders tribe, they get so many startups from India, and I mean crypto can still benefit from AI. The thing is, like one of the projects that I saw coming out from India, and that solved a really cool problem. See, right now, crypto is there are a lot of friction points when you're doing something in crypto, and people say that you have to understand it. And what these guys did was they said that let me run this process to AI, and the AI will generate what the process is doing in a human readable format. And that was something very cool that came from AI and crypto together. And I think that's where we are going with a lot of intent based project, wherein you say that you want to do something and AI kind of takes that part and attaches crypto to it. So I do feel that AI and crypto will merge together. Probably at some point in this year or next year. And yeah, in terms of the project, I do think that we have a lot more projects, lot of smarter projects getting built, not like just a normal project that's coming out. And I also feel that this trend is growing to a path wherein they are startup or they are projects that are trying to ease the flow by which people can interact with crypto. I think this is the trend that's coming up really well, wherein they know, okay, this is one feature that works very well, but this feature, people have to learn a lot to use this feature. So I'm going to build a startup that will ease this thing out. And I'm seeing this getting built a lot on lot, even when you're coming to base chains, right? They are trying to make sure that everything becomes very smooth for the user. Raghu has his hand up, so yeah, go ahead.
Before I forget that point, like you have to check out this app called Blackbird. This is
What is
an
it? Okay.
A16Z funded product, which
Oh,
essentially allows you loyalty experiences within Michelin star restaurants in New York. Okay, so
seriously?
if you've gone to like a place in New York, a Michelin star restaurant on a weekday, then you then unlock a value add on a high demand day where you'll get a chef's table. You can get maybe like a free
Fancy.
in one of these places. There's so many such, and anyone, so I have some of my friends who've used this app. So I told them, hey, do you know it's a crypto app? And no one has a clue. It is actually entirely its own.
Interesting.
So this is happening already. What Harsh is saying at a very very high level, and yeah, one more trend of making crypto more
So, but do
usable.
we see those interesting ads come out of India? Because we
Yeah.
have reached, we are at a stage where you have like solid developers. I mean, if 2022, if anything, it showed that we have solid developers in India. I mean, Hash push protocol is one of those examples, right? We have solid developers. So, but do we see this kind of examples coming out of India? Because these kind of
Yeah.
large scale. Can you
The,
name some?
Yes.
we did that Harsh was talking about Rivendell.
He
You were
hasn't
talking
named
about.
it.
Yeah.
You were talking about Rivendell. Uh,
Yes.
yeah. So Rivendell is an Indian project. It does that, right? And he's a good. He's very close to the two of us. Shlok, very good
Yeah.
chap. You
We
should
should
check.
take all these conversations offline for sure.
Yeah, you should.
I
But
mean, there
these
are a
apps
lot
are
of innovative projects that are coming out of India. I mean, of course, Push, we invented communication for Web3 from India. So that is something which we are very, very proud of. But you can also look at Polygon. They are basically building the next step or the next evolution of what will happen in Ethereum and how will you interact. So that's again a very cool project that's coming out of India. There's a layer
It has
one.
already come out. They are, it's not, they're already there. They are the OGs
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
ecosystem.
they are already there, but the thing that they are working on, that's like groundbreaking
ZK.
right now. Yeah, ZK and the aggregate layer that they want to form.
Agree.
And yeah, yeah, and recently they basically released a groundbreaking tech for Ethereum, which is Type 1 Prover. That is something what Vitalik wanted people to do. So that is basically the innovation level of India right now.
There are simple use cases like Yatra being built on blockchain. Guys, we have one of the largest apps out there that is using a simple tech to implement privacy, security, as well as very simple, efficient workflow, right?
true.
So lots of things are being
Yep,
done.
yep.
So, in this conversation, right? I mean,
Sorry,
please
okay,
do.
sorry. Before you
Yes.
move on, like I just want to
Yes.
make the record clear. There are great products that are coming out of India, and it's very important that your viewers take out of this.
Yeah, I will connect with both of you after the call.
Yeah.
We will take this conversation forward.
Yeah.
But see, in this conversation, so the one thing that has come out, I mean, which Raghu and I think Edul brought out is the money crypto and tech crypto. I think this is what I think our governor Shaktikanta Das keeps talking about, right? They believe in the blockchain, but not in the money aspect of it. So, is there some kind of a? My question is so can a blockchain exist without actually having the token? The token aspect is where a lot of challenges are coming from. I think that is. I know it's a sort of not a very it's a sort of a controversial topic,
The short
but
answer
yeah,
is
I
like,
see Harsh laughing. Yes, yes, Harsh.
no, the
Yeah.
short answer is
So
yes.
Yes, so
yeah,
you were saying something.
I I I I I kind of want to explain this because we do need to understand like what is crypto and Web3. Like in its very simple form, you are running a software, right? And I try to explain people like when they say like why money crypto is needed with this blockchain. So I explain in a very simple example. Like let's say you're a company, you require servers to run software, and the company buys and the company gets all the profit, and they are running the servers and it's all good. But now when you're moving to Web3, it's basically that you can run a software and the software will mathematically check and will keep itself running no matter who runs it. So the company doesn't run it. People like you and me run it. Ethereum happens like that. Bitcoin, any software happens like that. Now, imagine you are running a software. You need to have some incentive to run that software, right? When you rent a room out, it's not like use my room for free. So when you are giving your computing space, your bandwidth, you need to have some incentives. And Web3 or crypto evolved into that very novel solution that when you are running a software, based on how you're running the software and based on the game theory, we will award you this money crypto so that you are able to understand, and there's a win-win position that's created that you are running the software and therefore you are receiving crypto. And that's how Web3 operates as a whole. So when people talk about like Web3 and let's separate money and crypto, like that's already there. It's called Web2, it's called Amazon, and it's called distributed computing.
Edul, you were saying something. You want to?
No, I think the short answer is yes, the two are very distinct and the two are very distinct and different use cases, and they should be just followed that way.
That's a very diplomatic answer. Yes, Raghu.
No, the two need each other to live. Theoretically, yes, a public blockchain can exist without the token. But practically speaking, as Harsh rightly pointed out, when you give up your resources, you want recompense for it. And existing currency systems don't create for the the frictionlessness with which a international global supercomputer like Ethereum will need to be run. Right? Then that's what Ethereum is. It's a supercomputer. It provides you block space that is extremely valuable, and it helps you with compute and storage, and you can run applications using it. So when you think about it in that way, a native token as an incentive is one of the solutions that makes this sustainable to run. And so while the two have different problems and different faces, they need each other to exist. And so it's a lot more complicated than saying, one is not needed versus the other. The two of them have created a symbiotic relationship with each other. And I think India, in that sense, is doing a good job with respect to finding a nuanced path to solving this, as opposed to finding going kind of heavy-handed in one direction.
Gowree, would you like to weigh in on this?
Can I be very honest? Because this is the exact question, which bothered me right up front when we started. Actually, 2013 is the time our firm started focusing on the crypto as a space. And this is the first question that kept bothering me, where, when we had our internal discussions, but ultimately I had to reconcile on this to say, yes, this, as I think everybody has said it, right? So sometimes when the regulators look at it, if you look at something theoretically, because I'm a lawyer, I'm just relating it back to regulation. When you look at anything very theoretically, right, and in practice it's not going to work, those regulations are likely to fail.
Yeah.
Right? So somewhere and I don't even want to use the word regulators anymore. I would like to use the word enablers, right? So ultimately, if everybody has reconciled that this is here to stay, and there are benefits and the use cases, it's not just an asset. I think the first part of our conversation was relating to an asset and asset class in itself. But I think with what Harsh and Raghu have shared, there is much more than much more around it in that ecosystem, right? So that ecosystem which is going to be actually useful, I mean, for overall in a Web3 space, right? In that ecosystem, then that for that ecosystem to flourish, right? That is where I think everybody, has to reconcile that there are certain things which are practically not possible if you try to make and break, it's like try to break it into pieces. It will work as a holistic unit, and therefore the solutions, whether regulatory or otherwise, have to take that factual and practical aspect into account and only build things around it.
So when I started covering in 2021, it was all NFTs, board dates. Everybody were talking about buying NFTs. And 2022, again, it was Metaverse. Facebook changed its name to Meta to focus on the Metaverse. These were the two big narratives of 2021 and 2022. We know what happened to them. They are not the narrative anymore. I can see Raghu's. Yeah, you will speak. I'll go with you first. But what do you see happen in 2024? So what is the big wait, Raghu? What is going to be a very big narrative that has probably come out in 2024? Yes, Raghu, we'll start with you.
I don't think that the two narratives are dead. I think they're very much here. I think they were overhyped in the previous cycle. Vision Pro and Zuckerberg coming out with a statement like what he did yesterday, it means it's clearly a lot at play here. Look, I think the idea of spatial computing, metaverses, interconnected worlds is, I think it's important. I think it will unlock a lot. And all you need to do is travel from home to office in Bangalore every day. And you realize the amount.
Yeah, you just have to travel from Yelahanka to Indiranagar once.
Exactly my point, right?
At 10 in the morning.
Exactly. So you can realize how bad that, living in cities is going to be. And the future is remote if you want to tap into a very, very large workforce. But this needs new practices, new environments, and the metaverse actually will come into play there. And like we initially spoke about, it has to start at the OEM level before it comes down into the app level. And the OEM work has just started. And if you think that the NFTs are gone, definitely.
I didn't say they were gone. I didn't say they were gone. They just said the hype, board dates, and they were in millions of dollars. That has come down.
Thinking of a JPEG on a blockchain hash and then trading it for millions of dollars probably has not been there. But just the number of NFT driven projects, it's beautifully integrated itself into this loyalty systems of sorts, which is worth thinking about, right? Like it's a badge, it's a proof of honor, it's a certificate. Like Maharashtra government putting certificates on the blockchain, what do you think that is? That's an NFT. So that is this is in NFTs are here. There's a very, very clear use case for it. And it's being innovated upon now with layered NFTs, dynamic NFTs that are coming out there. It is going to become a part of a lot of applications that are going to be used. And don't be surprised if you walk into a retail store near you and then you get an NFT airdropped to you for shopping something. And then that NFT unlocks benefits for you later on. So no, both of these things are not actually even more relevant today than ever, which is also indicative of the problem of our industry. We're very narrative driven as opposed to actually use case driven, right? And that, I guess, is a little bit of the speculative nature of digital assets that comes into our space. But any new space is like this, and over time, it has reduced in our space as it has done with others before it kind of becomes in line with reality.
And while we are talking, a rock just got sold for $600,000, and I'm not kidding, guys. That just happened like 2 days back.
Collection as a habit will never go away, right? Why do people have big collections of Rolexes, or why do people collect fancy sports cars? And in the new generation, digital is just as valuable as the real thing. Why will you not want to collect those things? So that is not going away. I just think that it was overhyped.
No, it's it's actual usage. Like with whomever, at least the devs that I speak to, or the people who are trying to now figure out, okay, what is the next 10x thing that I put in money, and that's what starts off the hype cycle. Most people are talking about, okay, what is it? What is this thing that's actually being used? And that actual usage, is there a real world problem that it's solving? That is the part, that's the broader narrative, right? So for example, just generally speaking, layer twos that work and are working at scale and are solving problems is a narrative. Social platforms that actually use the blockchain tech to decentralize it and incentivize users to work on it is a narrative. And those are the things that are getting more and more and more traction and more just broader acceptance. And that's what these early adopters are looking to pick and choose for their 10x growth. And that's what drives narratives, and that's what drives then money flow as well.
So I'll just come in here, very briefly. I think all of you have said it, but I think sometimes what we do is, we see everything with our lens. And same thing happens, when in an ecosystem, but the next generations are completely different, right? So the bragging right itself is an asset, right, in their mind, where we will say, what does this, star really do for you, right? So when we work with social media companies and when we see newer products, because that's my job to see newer products, that time every time I ask, what is the use of this, right? But I think we look at use in a very with a different lens. So there are certain, as Edil said, there are certain situations that will solve real life problems, but others will just give you a sense of ownership, right? A sense of ownership which their sort of the peers recognize that yes, it has value, right? So there will be some of these different use cases which some may feel frivolous, but they do exist.
I think
I'm just
Swati,
going to
you're
have
on
a
mute.
specific question to you. I know you will have a lot to share. So I want to know, they've all shared about how it could be a bragging right, the use cases. But Harsh, what do you think as like the narrative for 2024? I mean, each of them have different options. Raghu is still sticks
Sure.
in metaverse being still the narrative, but yeah, but I want to
Yeah.
know from you.
Yeah.
I never said
Yeah.
that. I just said that they're not gone.
No, no, no.
So I mean, coming to narratives, like I agree, NFT metaverse, they're not gone. They're just getting expanded a lot, and we can see Apple moving into this space. And Apple is thinking 10 years down the line. Like Ready Player One is a movie. If people have seen it, that's where we are headed, and NFT and metaverse are going to play a huge part. But when it comes to 2024, I think there are a lot of very cool narratives that are coming in. I really feel a global bank is already done, but a DeFi 2.0 or a global bank that works across everything, that's coming up. And that's something that Web2 doesn't have, or even countries don't have right now. And that solves a real problem also, right? There are so many loans, or there's so many banks, especially in US and other Western countries, where saving rate is not high. And this global bank solves that. Of course, taking loans, this global bank solves that. So that is one narrative or DeFi 2.0 that's going to come. Of course, the second narrative is around chains and the more utility that these blockchains can build in. So think social. That's going to be very, very big in 2024. I'm from communication field, but yeah, communication is going to be very, very big because again, these things rely on communication. So yeah, I really feel like scalability, social, and the fact that all these two things and the fact that DeFi 2.0 that's just there, that's going to be like a really, really cool narrative. NFT is going to come back with a bang. Like it already started coming in. Like we can just see the stats. I told you like a rock got sold for $600,000. Pudgy Penguin basically moved, or they now are valued higher than what they were, or they have moved to a all-time high. And there's so many things that are coming up with NFTs. Like one thing we did with Unstoppable Domains when we partnered with them was that we took these NFTs and we made sure that, okay, if you have this NFT, you can now chat in a gated group. And that's again something that has blown up on Unstoppable. So all of these things are evolving for the better, and all of these things are unlocking new features. I'm just gonna stop over there because
Yes.
deep down there's homomorphic encryption, there is L2s and aggregation and all those things, but I think we can keep it
Yeah.
offline.
From the beginning of the year, I've been hearing is that bull market is here. And is it here? And what, I mean, a word of caution and probably what we can expect. I think Edul will go with you first. I think you would know. I mean, you work directly with the retail investors, you know their trends. So, what is the bull market here? What can we expect? And a
Price
word of caution as well.
Price-wise, BTC is up more than 100% over a year, right? What else do you expect? Having said that, keeping price aside, excitement is growing, and that's the real marker of bull market. Like, for example, what I typically tend to track is just Bitcoin search interest on Google Trends, and that started to grow as well, right? So those are markers that show you that we are getting into it. We are getting into another cycle where crypto becomes this front and center thing where people start asking these questions and talking about it over drinks with their friends. And that's where we are heading now.
Gowree, and then we will finish with Harsh and Raghu.
Sure, I think I mean the industry people are are better placed to answer the first question, but on the second one, I believe and I have said it before, but I just want to re-emphasize is the corporate governance, right, of all the players. I think that is a word of caution overall for the industry, and that is you're seeing that in other industries as well. What happens in the tech sector and all of that, right? So I think as a whole industry needs to watch out with their in other industry players, and if they feel some things are not going right, maybe by way of self regulation or otherwise, that is something one needs to be, because still the regulations come in or whatever, right? But luckily there are certain other oversights such as taxation regime or PMLA regime and all of that, right? So with that, I think somewhere transparency is coming in. So one is corporate governance, transparency as a part of that, right? And third one is more information sharing. So if with the investors and with now sort of in terms of educating the investors, right? And so it's also true, from an investor perspective, they should seek more information, more knowledge about the subject, rather than simply but just jumping in just for sake of it, right? So I think if some of these things work well till we reach like the best case scenario, at least in the meantime, these things should be word of caution.
Sure. So I think, like for me, there's a personal indicator, like if the bull run is approaching or not. That is when a friend or when few friends that I haven't spoken to in a year or so, they start calling and asking me about coins. That is probably something that's happening right now. So I'm guessing that the bull run is coming. Edul brought a very interesting terminology, like look at Google Trends. And the thing is, the past bull run and current bull run, Google Trends are only 20% there. So it kind of feels like we are going to enter into a bull run. That's what I would say. But yeah, word of caution, like people usually have these very complicated strategies of DCAing in, but they don't have strategies to DCA out. And usually what happens is that basically leaves people with a very bad taste in the mouth when everything gets over. So that is something that I would share. Try to make sure that you have a strategy of leasing out, and also don't risk everything. Uh, for example, even when we are approaching bull run, there are black swan events that can happen. FTX was a black swan event, and that will basically leave you all dry. So whenever you are investing, invest like how you do with shares and how you do with property, which is like you invest a bit and make sure that your risk appetite is covered and you are not over leveraging. So yeah, those will be my 2 pointers.
Yeah, I mean, I think Harsh stole my point, which is that friends start calling you and figuring out what this Bitcoin thing is. But I'm a builder and
That's
build.
because we have the same friends, Raghu.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, but I'm a builder, and builders have no bull and bear markets. It's always build market. So I'm really trying to. I find it distracting, and so do several other builders who are like just wanting to build something that people would want to use. So uh, if you ask me, yes, it sounds like it, but I don't think it matters very much, and not a lot has different. Not a lot is different from how things were before.
Awesome. If you have any closing remarks, if you want to add anything at all, Gowree, Harsh, and
I
Raghu.
just want to add, I think you also had sort of, in our prior conversation discussed this as to, what can India do? I think India can do a
Yes.
lot in this. We have shown, we have been innovative in, building public infrastructures, for example, right? Digital public infrastructure. So if we really put our mind to it, we can actually show a way forward, with the sandboxes and all of that, try out various models. One is to sort of promote the industry, right? Enable the industry with, with some of these sort of models, as also show a way, as a part of G20, lead that conversation about a global, cooperation. We have already done that, but actually get into the nitty gritty of that. I think, and if the industry and professionals can collaborate with the government, that may sort of speeden up the process.
Yeah, I'll just add on just one thing. Like I believe in this Aryabhat's vision of India, which basically means like in the past, when it comes to Web 2 or when it comes to computer IT industry, we have been service leaders and not innovators. But with Web3 and crypto, there's this chance now wherein we know how tech works, and now we just have to fit that into Web3 equivalent format, which basically brings India huge amount of opportunity wherein we can become innovation leaders. And I think a part of the industry or part of the chunk of Indian demography have started doing that, which we see because people go to Builders Drive and there's so many founders that we are seeing getting up and running and trying to solve very unique problems. So yeah, I feel that India is really well suited to get into this innovation-driven sector, wherein the Silicon Valley or the next Silicon Valley is probably Bangalore, even with the traffic.
Oof.
Uh,
I mean, yeah, he's right. It is India has a lot to give to the space. We feel like the creator class of Web3 will be India dominant. It already is. And for those who haven't seen, there is the biggest thing in India right now, out of India right now, out of in crypto, is something like an eigenlayer, right? And not enough people are talking about that. This is also what India can produce and contribute to the space. So yes, the creator class of Web3 will be Indian.
Great. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you for your time. It was a very interesting conversation. It was informal as well. Thanks a lot for taking out your time. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Crypto products and NFTs are unregulated and can be highly risky. There may be no regulatory recourse for any loss from such transactions.